Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 51 of TalentED, the podcast where we're going to dive deep into some stories of those who mold future leaders in our schools. And I'm your host, Dr. Skanson, and coming at you from the School Pro studios here in Minnesota. Today, we're honored to have a very special guest, a former Minnesota resident gone missing but now found, Joshua Stamper, a dynamic figure in the world of education. You can see he's got some stuff behind him that is a little clue of his work, but Aspire to Lead, Teach Better team, just an overall just amazing educator and training and development specialist for the Teach Better team, oversees the Teach Better podcast network. His journey through education has seen him in the roles of, let's see if I get all these right, middle school administrator, classroom art educator, athletic coach, not just a leader, but a published author of Aspire to Lead, a respected voice in leadership coaching and educational presentations. And today he's with us on TalentED, and I'm so excited. So with that, welcome Joshua to TalentED. Tell us about yourself, man.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. And missing from Minnesota, that's very true. Although I got a chance at the beginning of the year, 2024, I started off, kicked it off right, got up to see my mom, my sister, some friends in Minnesota. So it was so good to be back and, go back to the old neighborhood and, spend some time there. So
Right. And it
it was
probably wasn't even
great.
that cold.
No, there's barely any snow. I don't know. You guys are all having a record low. I hear that you don't have a lot of snow up there, but here in Colorado, we've been getting the snow for you. So we've been taking the
Yeah,
hit, getting the inches. But no, it was great to be up there and see some amazing educators up there that are working in schools and just get to spend some time, like I said, back in the old neighborhood.
for
But
sure.
Eric, you had asked about myself. I am a proud husband and father of 6 children. Yeah, I did grow up in Minnesota, but I am kind of a transplant.
Mm-hmm.
We resided in Texas for 15 years, and during that time was foster parents for 12 years. So we have 2 biological children and 4 adopted. We had
Wow.
6 placements in that time frame of those 12 years, and during that time, I got to be an art teacher, be a coach of basketball, football, and track, and then also dean of students, and then an assistant principal. So spent 9 years as an administrator, and then just the last year and a half have transitioned
Mm-hmm.
to being a part of the Teach Better team, where I get to travel all over the country and work with educators. But like you said, also work with the podcast network, the admin mastermind, and pretty much have my hands in a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
so much so that I just got a new title, Director of Innovation for the Teach Better team. And so that just is really fancy just to say, changing education in different ways. So one of the topics, is trauma informed or trauma responsive education, which we'll probably be talking about today.
Yeah, for
But that's
sure.
one of the pieces that I want to innovate, especially with like school discipline and working with schools.
Well, it's a much needed area and much, I would say, misunderstood, and
Hmm.
the impact that it has. So I love the idea that you're kind of working in both trauma responsive, and then also the restorative, because that really is how we have to approach these
Yep.
students who have trauma. Like these old paradigms, these old algorithms of, sit down or you're suspended or that stuff doesn't work when
No.
people are already coming with trauma. And so I'm really excited to talk more about this with you today. So actually, why don't you just start us off by in sharing kind of what inspired you to focus on trauma responsive ed and restorative strategies in your work?
Yeah, Eric, it was kind of something I wasn't expecting, honestly. I was kind of getting burnt out. I was a dean of students for a Title I school in Dallas, and what we were seeing was just giant increase in student discipline. And what I had in my tool belt, which was expected, was the detentions, the
Mm-hmm.
ISS, the OSS, right? And what we were finding was that the behaviors were only increasing, it wasn't decreasing. It wasn't really helping the situation at all. And so I was extremely frustrated. At the same time, our family, myself and my wife, decided that we were going to become foster parents. And
Mm-hmm.
so with that, there's just a ton of training that I wasn't expecting. I was very apprehensive about it too, because I was like, hey, I'm a parent too. They seem fine. Like, why do I need training? But what in fact happened was we got training with TCU on just a bunch of different strategies on working with children that have seen trauma in their life. Obviously, in foster care, they're being taken from their homes.
Mm-hmm.
Some children, like our kids that we have adopted, they had trauma in utero, and so we're starting to see the effects, as 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, right? And things that I didn't even truly understand. So it was talking about this relationship based and trauma informed strategies to use with foster kids. And this was with Professor Purvis, and TCU does just a phenomenal job. So
Mm-hmm.
anyone that's watching this, if you want more information, they have a lot of free information for educators. So definitely check that out. Professor Purvis, God rest her soul, has passed away, but TCU has continued that research and continued to work on this trust-based strategies. So going through that, I started to think like, okay, this is wonderful as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
but the behaviors that you're talking about and the response to those behaviors is very different than what I'm doing in the school, but the behavior is the same. So why are we doing something so punitive at the campus level and not using some of these strategies,
Mm-hmm.
as an administrator, as teachers? And so I brought that information back to my administrative team and was like, hey, do you mind if I start to, research this more, maybe create like a team of folks to see if we could be more creative with how we're working with students in regards to their behavior? And they were in the same boat as me, is looking at the data saying, okay, what we're doing isn't working, so why not? Like, let's try something. So what I did was I built this relationship action team. That's what I called it. Unfortunately, it got the nickname RATS because the acronym. I did not intend that, and probably would change the
Right.
name of the group based on that. But yeah, we were known as the RATS group, and it started off with like 7 folks just diving into research, trying to find different strategies. And we had really 3 different things that we wanted to happen within this group. Was one, we need to be open-minded. So whatever, biases we had or experiences prior, you just need to dive in and take it with a grain of salt. Like, maybe this will work because we don't know. We haven't tried it yet. Second thing is to try the
Mm-hmm.
different strategies that we're learning about. And then 3, to share out the things that are working. So being an advocate of the work and also inviting other folks into the relationship action team. And so it's kind of a grassroots movement because I wasn't the expert. I didn't know what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
and neither did the teachers. But I did know that they were like-minded and wanted to learn more because they also were seeing things shift on the campus with student behavior. And so what happened was we started with 7. We ended up with almost 40 people in the group by the end of this school year, which was essentially half of our teachers. And so it was very simple the next year as we transitioned to year 2 to say, okay, this is something that's working. We're seeing a benefit. More people are buying into it. Let's make it campus wide. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was kind of the take on things, because what I didn't want, Eric, was to make it a top-down initiative. I didn't want to go in and be like, hey, you all need to do this. We're doing it as a campus. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know the research. I don't know the strategies, but this is what we're going to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish. And so I felt like that was just going to be a very disruptive thing for the campus culture, but then also something that people wouldn't buy into. And so, bringing them side by side, kind of creating a smaller group and then let it expand really helped for us to essentially make a beta group, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
so that we could try it out and see if this was something that we want to continue. And yeah, we definitely got buy-in, and we definitely saw a huge shift in the mindset of our teachers going into year 2.
I just wrote down a few things here. I think there's some really key parts to leadership that you nailed. This is just my take on this, but being so intentional about how you rolled it out,
Mm-hmm.
gaining momentum. You started with a small group, but it's that snowball effect, right?
Yeah.
You start rolling downhill and you're gaining momentum. The other thing is I think recognizing the cycle of the familiar that you're in, right? And how to break free from that. There's so many that just run the cycle of the familiar. This is how
Mhm.
I was disciplined, so this must be how we get disciplined. This is how I was taught, so this is how I must teach. I think it's a really strong leadership. Um, uh, what am I looking for? Trait to be able to spot the cycle of the familiar and to, it's like putting a stick in the spokes of a bike, right? Like somebody's got
Yeah.
to like wake everybody up. So
Mhm.
great job on that. I think that's hopefully we get to hear a little bit more about the rats. And this was at middle school, right?
It is at middle school. Yeah, it was a 6 through 8 campus. Yeah, and so thankfully, I've had an opportunity to do the same thing on multiple campuses in multiple
Yeah.
districts, specifically in Texas. But yeah, it was something that obviously I'm extremely passionate about, and still continue to
Hmm.
teach, at conferences and within the school districts. But yeah, that was a plan and a model that worked in the first campus, so I just continued that work,
Hmm.
wherever I went.
So, in your experience, how do these trauma responsive practices transform the learning environments for students, and maybe even particularly in the middle school setting? Like, what difference does
Yeah.
it make for kids?
Well, I think the main thing, especially, I mean, we've probably seen this more so after the pandemic, but I think students are just really craving that relationship and that human interaction. And a lot of our students, and I would tell my staff this all the time and continue to tell folks all over the country, is that, we just assume, especially our eighth graders, some of them look like they've got wives, kids, and are driving to
Yeah.
school because, a lot of them were taller than me, looked very mature, but they didn't possess the skills to recognize their emotions, communicate what they were feeling, and then work through adverse situations. And so for us, it was really taking a proactive stance. What can we do as educators within the classroom to make sure that one, we're building strong relationships?
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean like I know the kid's name, I know the parents, I know, a couple things about, what they like, going on a little bit deeper of a human connection, not only connecting with the teacher, but then finding ways to connect with our students. Because a lot of times, even though they're in the same classroom, they don't truly know their neighbor or the people
Hmm.
within their classroom. So finding opportunities to do that, and then also finding ways for our students to recognize when they're having a really stressful time and how can they deal with that. There's so many kids that go through some type of adverse
Hmm.
situation and they just lose their mind, right? Um, and that's when we start to see some of the behavior. So what can we do in place at the beginning to allow them to recognize that, give them strategies to de-escalate before it ramps up to a point where we need to then get
Hmm.
into the consequences and what that looks like. The other thing we wanted to implement within the classroom is what we call relationship circles. That's what we called it. There's a lot of different names for it, but what we're trying to do is model a circle for them so that when there was an opportunity at the other end of it, right? Let's say they made a poor choice and they go into a restorative circle,
Hmm.
the concept and what that looks like has already been established. They've already experienced it.
Right.
Now it's a low level experience for them prior in the relationship circle where they're getting to know each other. But in that relationship circle, a couple things are happening. One, they're practicing listening to one another. They're giving their attention. They're also, finding value in their voice and being able to connect with other people that have like-minded things, right? We would do silly things like, hey, what's your favorite restaurant fries, right?
Hmm.
Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, whatever. And I mean, middle schoolers love food. They love talking
Hmm.
about themselves and about what they love. So just something as simple as that, which is, like I said, a low level thing, really becomes a wonderful experience. The other thing too with the teachers is they always wanted to find something that was quick. Obviously, we don't want to take them away from the lesson plan, but they were already inserting brain breaks and things like that into their lesson because they saw the value in that. Well, let's just switch it a little bit and find a way for them to, like I said, make those human connections, work on their verbal and nonverbal communication, but then
Hmm.
also put in a situation where if they had to go into a restorative circle, those process is already like constructed so that they aren't in a foreign space. Obviously, we had to like go into the nitty gritty as far as like the rules on a restorative group or a restorative circle, but at least they had the construct already experienced.
Hmm. I think that's so brilliant. Again, just the way that it was implemented. It's so interesting to think about how do we bring adults into this space where we can start modeling for kids, right?
Hmm.
And there's there's so many things that upset me with bad practices, obviously, as an educator. But one of the pieces that I keep coming back to, and you've reminded me of this again, is rules without relationships equals rebellion,
Yep.
right? But rules with relationships equals respect. So how do we set these boundaries with these kids that typically would like to push it, right?
Yeah.
You got to have the response, or you got to have the respect to go along with it. And I think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that relationship. They're looking for somebody to garner that respect with. And I know over and over, if we just take the time to talk to them like a human instead of
Yep.
a subject, we're going to get so much better results. And I think these practices that you're talking about, the circles, the talking, the practicing, that's what helps.
Yeah, and I always talk about, like in my sessions, I always say to get knowledge to the brain, you have to go through the heart, and that's regardless as a leader, if you're talking with your students or with your staff. We every staff meeting, we were very intentional about making sure that we practice this with the staff. So then once we were done, we're like, this is something that you can provide to your students in the
Hmm.
classroom. So it wasn't just, we're talking about relationship circles, right? So we would do that at the beginning of every staff meeting, every meeting that we had, PLC, whatnot. Like we did this with our staff so that we made sure that it was important to us. It should be important to you all too, right? And so
Hmm.
that way it just was infused into our culture. It was infused in everything that we did, regardless of what we're meeting about. It didn't matter. At least we're going to have something that connected to that relational piece. We used to do a 2-2 strategy too, like with those really tough kids that you had maybe nothing related to them. You couldn't
Hmm.
get that relationship with them, of spending 2 weeks, just 2 minutes, not about the instruction. It was just about getting to know them. And the student didn't even need to respond. It was just about getting to know them on a deeper
Hmm.
level. And we also talked about like getting on their level, right? So like if they're sitting down at the table, not towering over them, like getting on your
Hmm.
knee and having a small conversation just to the side, to let them know like they're important and that you value that they're in your class,
Hmm.
and I want to get to know you on a human level. And so yeah, it was just like I said, we even practiced that of, as an administrator going in, and I used to do relationship walks where I would do the exact same thing, and then just let them know like this is something that you can do with your students too.
Hmm. Relationship blogs are amazing. I love the idea that when you walk alongside somebody and have a conversation, it's much different than talking at somebody. So
Correct.
it just makes that accessibility and vulnerability so much more.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, I think we can all sit and listen to this and go, yes, this is what we should be doing. So, what challenges do you think we have from shifting from traditional disciplinary approaches to a more restorative trauma-informed model? Like, because it sounds good, it feels good, then why don't we do it? Like, what's in the way?
Oh my goodness. So, like you talk about our own experiences, right? We default to that. When I first became a teacher, I defaulted to how I was taught. It wasn't the best strategy, and it was especially not
Hmm.
the best techniques, but I had to like get out of that and figure out what was the best way for myself and for my students, which looked a lot different. The same thing with administration. When I first became an administrator, I was an administrator just like I was administered
Hmm.
as a kid, which was very punitive, and it didn't work, right? So for me, the first thing is I'm giving permission to be creative in what you're doing.
Hmm.
And so many times we just default to what we know, but we also default what we think is the expectation from our higher ups. And a lot of times that's not the case. You're a campus administrator, you have to understand you have to do what's best for your campus.
Hmm.
And that may look different than what other folks are doing. I hate the cookie cutter idea. I don't like that at all. So I would just say, like, when it comes to making sure that your students are mastering the content. Look at your toolbox, right? You probably have 100 different strategies that you use in the classroom when it comes to academics. But when it
Right?
comes to behavior, what does your toolbox look like? Most folks just have the hammer. That's not the right thing, right? Because as we know, not everyone is a nail. You might be a screw, and you would never use a hammer for a screw, right?
Right.
So, what's the toolbox look like within your classroom when it comes to student discipline? The other thing I would say is, yes, we're teaching math, science, history, whatnot, but we're not just teaching that. We have to hit the whole person, which is we also have to teach about
Hmm.
emotional regulation. We have to make sure that we're teaching them about, how to handle certain situations, because as we know, if we're looking at future ready skills, a lot of those skills aren't about retaining or mastering content. It's about the human connection, how we communicate, and how do we make sure that we're emotionally regulated. So, some of those lifelong skills that our students need to be successful in the future, we're not even touching on that as educators and administrators. So, we do need to find a way to be able to teach student behavior also.
And Josh, you're such a strong advocate for this leadership and this change within schools. If you had to give like 3 points for leaders to think about to foster the culture that can embrace these practices and the restorative strategies at all levels of whether you're preschool or high school or middle school or elementary, I mean, what's your 3 point, like you got to do this, this, and this?
Oh, as far as implementing trauma informed and restorative
Yeah, I mean,
practices.
how do you help leaders foster that culture?
Well, first off, I want you all to understand like you're going to be spending time on this subject, but where do you want to spend your time on it? Right?
Hmm.
So for me, I was spending hours and hours on putting students in ISS and finding a space large enough for those children and then talking with the parents and all this other stuff. And so for me, I'd rather be on the other end of the proactive piece and spending most of my time in the relationship piece and making sure that the environment my students are in is something that where they
Hmm.
feel comfortable and safe, right? So if I'm spending my time in that space, obviously I'm going to feel much better about myself and I'm going to decrease the discipline that is needed on the back end. So just ask that question, where do you want to spend your time? And for
Hmm.
me, it was very obvious. The other piece is don't just go with status quo. We know what has been done before, and we also know the data behind it. So, like I said before, I'm giving you permission to be creative and try different things.
Hmm.
Because as a leader, we can't just go every single year and do the exact same thing. Because as we know, every student is different, every student class is different, and culture in the United States changes drastically year to year
Hmm.
also. So we as a school district and as a campus need to change with the changes that are going on within their environment. And the last thing is that you need your advocates, you need your disciples, I would always say,
Hmm.
So find those like-minded folks because if you're trying to do the top-down initiative, it's not going to work. You're going to get pushback regardless. So find people that are at least understanding that there needs to be change and believe that, they are willing to go alongside you in trying to work in this because if I didn't have those 7 people that I started off with, there's no way I could have got this implemented on a grander scale over
Hmm.
time. And this is hard work. It takes time. So I would say the last thing is if you think this is going to happen overnight, you are going to be
Right.
extremely disappointed. This sometimes took 3 to 5 years to eventually get the entire campus on board, understanding, feeling comfortable with the strategies that were implemented in the classroom. So this is something that's not overnight,
Hmm.
but yes, although it takes a lot of time, it is so worth it in the long run as far as making sure that you have a culture that's sustaining this idea of creating a future where students understand, again, how to regulate themselves and then also how to work through adverse situations.
Well, when you have a team, you can coordinate services, right? But if you have a
Yep.
team built on trust, now you can collaborate on services. So it's a
Hmm.
big difference there. And it's the latter that is sustainable. And it
For
sounds
sure.
like you were masterful of making sure that you had the right players together on the team to collaborate this initiatives going forward. Um, I'm going to change it on us a little bit. So talking about, putting the stick in the spokes, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna shove it in there and we're gonna change directions, Josh.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, you ready? So, when you're not immersed in the world of education, leadership, podcasting, it sounds like you're a very busy man. What's the one hobby or activity that brings you joy? What do you like to do?
I love sports. You can't see it, but half of my office is full of Minnesota. You would appreciate this. Athletic stuff as far as Vikings, Timberwolves, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I love to partake in watching my Minnesota sports, but then
Hmm.
also, with 6 kids and 4 of them being boys, they all want to do some sort of
Sure.
sport. So yeah, definitely spending time with them, shooting the basketball, throwing the football, whatnot. So
If you could have dinner, this was such a cliche question, but I love it. If you could have dinner with a historical figure, who would you choose?
Oh my goodness. Van Gogh.
Why?
Van Gogh is my favorite artist for a lot of different reasons. One, just because although he is an artist within a certain genre, he is very unique within that genre, right? Or that stage of art. So,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to that, I find him fascinating because he did not have a long art span, but created a ton of content or paintings within
Mm-hmm.
that very short span. So I just find him extremely intriguing, in addition to the fact that I just love his art.
Okay. Fair. Can you share a book that has profoundly impacted your thinking?
Oh, goodness. As you can see, I have a lot here to
I
choose from.
know, I know.
Fair is not always equal. Probably not what you would expect because it's more on like grading. But that book really, I was very young in as a teacher, and it was the first book that we did as a book study as a campus that really challenged some of my preconceived ideas
Hmm.
in regards to assessment. And yeah, I just remember some really intense conversations that
Mm-hmm.
were with my staff at the time that was just really fruitful as far as my understanding of what grades were, but then also to see, which was good for educational leadership later, was just like how profound just getting with your colleagues
Mm-hmm.
to flush out ideas to get a greater understanding of what we can do to
Hmm.
better
I like
understand
that.
our students. Yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna head into rapid response. So this is the last section. And your
Cool.
answer is either Colorado or Minnesota.
What are you doing
Okay.
to me?
I
What are
know.
you doing to me
I'm
here?
forcing it here. I'm gonna force it. For stargazing, high altitude clarity in Colorado or northern lights in Minnesota.
Northern Lights.
Preferred winter activity, snowboarding down Colorado slopes or ice fishing on a Minnesota lake.
Snowboarding.
Cuisine, Colorado's green chili or Minnesota hot dish.
Gotta go to the hot dish. That's my
Do,
Minnesota
do you
ways.
do you do you bring hot dish? Do you show them what this is about in Colorado, like a real hot dish? I feel like you
They have no
should.
idea. I just remember Sundays, church, hot dishes, the whole
Mm-hmm.
nine yards. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think this is an easy one. This is a softball. Outdoor concert venue, Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado or Minneapolis Sculpture Garden in Minnesota.
I gotta go Red Rocks.
Yeah, that's an easy
It's
one.
phenomenal.
Unique geographic feature, the Great Sand Dunes of Colorado or the
Mm,
Boundary Waters of Minnesota.
Boundary waters.
Charming small town atmosphere. Who's got it better? Telluride, Colorado's mountain backdrop, or Stillwater, Minnesota's riverfront?
I have such classic memories of Stillwater and like especially like 4th of July and the fireworks over the river and fishing there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have to go Stillwater.
Okay. Okay. Iconic road trip, Million Dollar Highway in Colorado, or the North Shore Drive in Minnesota.
I will say driving through Colorado is beautiful, so I'll have to go that way.
State Park exploration, Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yes.
Actually, I put this wrong. National Park exploration, Rocky Mountain National Park, or Voyager National Park in Minnesota.
The Rocky Mountain National Park is just phenomenal.
Feel
So
like
if
that's an
anyone
easy
hasn't
one
done
too.
that, the animals too are just everywhere. It's just such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. We've camped there too. It's fantastic.
You have to qualify for this next question, Josh. Do you have a dog?
Two dogs.
Two dog. Okay, you qualify. Dog-friendly outdoor adventure, hiking Colorado's pet-friendly trails, or canoeing with your dog in Minnesota lakes.
Hmm. Probably hiking because I've experienced that with my dogs and it was successful. I don't think they would be very successful in water.
Last one, seasonal festivity, summer music fest in Colorado or winter Minnesota St. Paul Winter Carnival.
Ooh, I love the Winter Carnival.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done that as a kid. You're talking about the ice sculptures and the
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah. Gotta do
Josh, I
that.
think you effectively rode the line perfectly, so nobody
I
can
was trying to be
tell.
very political, both sides, because
You
I
did
love
it.
both states. Yeah.
Okay, so in all seriousness now, just before we wrap up, Josh, do you have any upcoming projects, appearances, messages you'd like to share with our audience, or anything that like a final call to action?
Oh my goodness, yes. So, well, maybe I'll announce this for you, Eric, and your audience. I'm writing a book with Charlie Peck. She's phenomenal, but we're
Mm-hmm.
doing the language of behavior. It was spawned from like a presentation that I present at. I use this all the time at
Mm-hmm.
conferences, whatnot, talking about just how important it is to one, identify the fact that trauma is very prevalent within our students and our student body, but then two, like I said, being on that creative side. So giving a lot of
Mm-hmm.
strategies in regards to the proactive and reactive side of things when it comes to student behaviors. So we are in the midst of this. We're only like 3 chapters in, so it's very
Mm-hmm.
new and nobody knows about it except for your audience right now. But very excited to, get that
That's
resource out
amazing.
eventually, hopefully next year. As you know, writing books is a pretty big,
It's a
lengthy
project.
process. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's probably the one thing I'm super stoked about right now. As this last month we started writing on it, and then just as far as call to action, like if you are interested in learning more, definitely reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I meet with folks all the time on this, trying to help as best I can and provide solutions to, the needs of the campus. But also like I'm not the only one, right? There's so
Mm-hmm.
many other resources out there. Talking about books, right? There's so many books out there that folks can find both in the educational space and outside of that to just learn more on this topic and find additional trauma responsive practices.
Well, you heard it there, folks. We got a book coming and a call to action. Be curious, right? If you want to know more,
Yep.
be curious. Read a book, contact somebody, have a conversation. It's pretty simple. With that, that's going to bring us to the end of another episode of TalentED. So a huge thank you to our guest, Josh Stamper, for sharing his invaluable insights on trauma responsive, restorative strategies in education. So glad we found you in Colorado. I can let all the Minnesota people know that you're not lost. Um, with that, it's clear by talking and embracing these strategies, we're going to have a more supportive and understanding environment in both for both our students and our educators. So with that, remember to connect with School Pro if you want to book Josh, or find Josh on your own. Be curious too. That's fine too. Or other leading educational voices for your next event. So all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope that this discussion inspires you to reflect on how you can be positive, kind, and supportive, which is our motto here. Stay PKS, positive, kind, and supportive. Until next time, I'm Dr. Eric Skanson, wishing you a transformative day ahead, everybody. Thanks.